sector because I think of lack of transparency, in certain cases a lack of accountability. So we, as with the markets, there's a lot of uncertainty out there as to where this economy is. You add to that economic conditions that in some cases are soft, in other cases are really not. The economy in many ways are doing quite well. And you add to that what is a proper response in light of what I would say is troublingly high inflation. This morning the PPI came out, I'm sure many of you know, and it was very high, which obviously should be a concern to the Fed, should be a concern to us. When you have a slowing economy and a high inflation rate, it makes it particularly difficult to know what to do or what not to do. So we would be very interested in your advice in that regard. But I will say the inflation numbers this morning were not good news. Mr. Paul.
Representative Paul, gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this. I'd like unanimous consent to submit a written statement.
Without objection, any written statements any of the witnesses or members would like to include will be included as part of the record.
I want to thank the chairman for holding these hearings, especially the title of the hearing. The title is very appropriate: Monetary Policy and the State of the Economy, because indeed they are related. Sometimes we in the Congress and for other reasons, economic problems are created, then we look to the Federal Reserve to solve the problems. From my viewpoint, we should look at the Federal Reserve a little earlier, because I see so many of our problems that we have coming from monetary policy. The Austrian economists, led by Mises and Hayek, of course won the Nobel Prize, talks significantly about monetary policy and how inflation of the money supply is the real culprit, because it distorts interest rates and causes the malinvestment and the excessive debt. And it is for this reason that most economists accept the notion that inflation is always a monetary policy. And yet today we still talk about, well, the price of oil is going up, so therefore it might lead to inflation, rather than saying what is happening to the money supply. Well, currently we don't get all the statistics on the money supply anymore. M3 was an important number, total money supply, and that hasn't been looked at for a couple years, and yet private sources report that that is growing at about 16% a year. Now, the significance of this is the distortion that it causes in the marketplace. The Austrian economists predicted well before the collapse of socialism at the end of the 20th century that it would collapse, because we've eliminated the pricing structure. If you don't have free market pricing, you can't determine what to produce and at what quality and what quantity, and only the market can do that. But likewise, they were every bit as critical about the manipulation of interest rates, and that's what the Federal Reserve's job is doing, always making interest rates go up or down. And they generally get it wrong both times. They either have them too high or too low, and they'll get criticism for both sides. But we as a nation who champion the marketplace have totally rejected the idea that the market can determine interest rates, and that's why I think we get into trouble like this. In the 60s, we faced a similar problem because we were pretending that we could have guns and butter and it wouldn't really cost us. Well, anybody who knows about the 70s, it cost us a lot. But right now, what we're looking forward to is a cost much greater than what we witnessed in the 1970s, because we're much deeper in debt. Our foreign indebtedness is overwhelming. Our productive jobs are overseas, and inflation is roaring again. Government statistics always lag reality, but even government statistics today, as Congressman Baucus points out, over 12% a year. I mean, this is serious business. We are in stagflation. I don't think there's a question about, are we in a recession? we are in a recession. The numbers will catch up. No matter what the government statistics say, talk to the American people. They're having a tough time. Ask middle-class Americans what they're doing. They're being wiped out because their cost of living is going up much faster than their wages can keep up with. Same way with Social Security beneficiaries. This is all a consequence of monetary policy, the fact that we allow ourselves to resort to the creation of money. If we had to pay for this war and for the welfare programs we have here at home by taxes, this would all end quickly. But instead, we tax to the hilt, then we borrow as much as we can, then there's a limit on that because interest rates might go up, and we fear that, so then we resort to the creation of new money out of thin air, which is another tax. Because the value of that dollar goes down, prices go up, who gets hit the most? The middle-class Americans. This is why middle-class Americans are really suffering. So there's a lot of things, I believe, that could be done. But once the Fed causes this distortion, we can't resort to the fact of saying, well, we need more regulations by the government. We need more regulations, but I'd like to see the regulations come from the marketplace to make the adjustments necessary. But it is inevitable to have a recession once you create an artificial boom with the inflationary policy of the Fed. And that is what we're facing today. We're in the early stages of a recession, and unfortunately, many who have studied Austrian economics predict that this one is going to be long and tough and a lot worse than the problems we faced in 1979 and 80. Hopefully, we can do the right things, but it would involve the Congress cutting back and not putting the pressure on the Fed to monetize this. And it is an inevitable myth that we have lived with that war is an economic stimulus. That is absolutely false, and yet we live by that. We think, well, if we just spend money, and the war spending participates in our GDP growth, and pretend that we're growing by building bombs that are blown up. This is an absolute myth, and therefore this economy, I think, is on shaky grounds, and we need to go back to look at what sound economic policies are as well as sound monetary policy. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.